China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, just upgraded their free trade agreement, strengthening economic ties. The key U.S. ally, President of Philippines Ferdinand Marcos Jr., is set to assume the ASEAN chair in 2026. What does this mean for China-ASEAN relations and disputes in the South China Sea? We'll discuss this and more on this week's China Report. Welcome to the China Report. Every week, we'll be helping you sort through all the propaganda with an independent view of the country that we're taught to hate, but know so little about. I'm your host, Amanda Yee. These are this week's headlines. China suspended a ban on exporting some dual-use materials to the U.S., the Chinese Ministry of Commerce announced on Sunday. This follows the meeting between Presidents Trump and Xi Jinping at the end of October, which brought a truce to the ongoing trade war. The move covers exports of gallium, germanium, and antimony, which are used in the production of advanced semiconductors, smartphones, and computing, and in military technologies, such as electronic warfare and surveillance systems. Since the Trump-Xi meeting, Beijing has also relaxed checks on exports of rare earths and lithium battery materials and agreed to resume shipping key chips for Europe's manufacturers. China is planning to send astronauts to the moon. According to its developers, China will soon begin flight tests of the Long March 10, the rocket designed to land astronauts on the moon by the year 2030. This will make China the second country after the U.S. to land people on the lunar surface. Officials state China aims to conduct the first test launch of the Long March 10 rocket and a lunar-capable crew spacecraft next year. Rong Yi, a rocket expert with the China Academy of Launch Vehicle Technology, stated that researchers were also working on the large-scale application of reusable rockets and to build the capacity for low-cost, frequent access to space. Zhang Jingbo, spokesperson for China's human spaceflight program, said October 30th at a pre-launch press conference, quote, "Regarding the specific timeline, we remain steadfast in our goal of achieving a Chinese lunar landing by 2030. It should be noted that many new technologies still need to be verified, the product development workload is substantial, the quality requirements are high, the flight test schedule is tightly coordinated, and the progress is tight, presenting various risks and challenges," unquote. Average life expectancy in China continues to rise. According to data released by the city's Municipal Health Commission on Monday, the average life expectancy of Beijing residents has now reached 83.93 years in 2024. This is up from 82.51 years a year earlier. Beijing News reported that key maternal and infant health indicators have also reached internationally advanced levels, with a maternal mortality rate of 0.69 per 100,000 people and an infant mortality rate of 1.35 per 1,000. Wang Jinwei, a deputy director of the Beijing Municipal Health Commission, said the improvements reflect the city's efforts to expand high-quality healthcare resources and strengthen primary medical services. Beijing has also directed more medical resources to underserved areas, as well as expanded efforts to improve primary healthcare and psychological treatment. Wang said Beijing will continue to improve community healthcare capacity under the new 15th five-year plan, aiming to ensure residents can access high-quality, convenient medical services close to home. Average life expectancy across China as a whole reached 79 years of age in 2024, and the government recently announced it aims it to 80 years of age by 2030. China kicked off its 15th annual National Games in Guangzhou this Sunday. The National Games, which will run through November 21st, is jointly co-hosted this year by Guangdong, Hong Kong, and Macau, otherwise known as the Greater Bay Area, with the participation of thousands of athletes. The opening ceremony showcased Greater Bay Area traditions and culture, including the Guangdong Lion Dance, Cantonese opera, and performances from Hong Kong pop stars Andy Lau and Joey Young. Also included in the show were embodied robotics, highlighting the Greater Bay Area's position as a major technological hub. President Xi Jinping also attended the ceremony. According to Li Jing, an official with the organizing committee, the cross-border nature of this year's competition is designed to foster interconnectivity, drive coordinated development, and showcase the unique strengths of one country, two systems. Well, at this year's annual summit, China updated its trade agreement with ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The bloc remains China's top trading partner, with bilateral trade reaching $1 trillion in 2024. Also announced at this year's ASEAN summit, President of the Philippines, a key U.S. ally in the region, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., will assume the rotating chair in 2026. What does this mean for the future of China-ASEAN relations, for tensions in the South China Sea? To discuss this, we are so honored to have back on Anna Malindog-Uy. Anna is a geopolitical analyst and columnist for the Manila Times. She's also the Deputy Secretary General for the Association for Philippines-China Understanding, the Vice President for External Affairs at the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, and she's also a PhD candidate in economics at the Institute of South-South Cooperation and Development at Peking University. She joins us today from Beijing. Anna, welcome back to the China Report.
Thank you so much for inviting me again, and I'm very happy to be back here. I think it's almost 1 year already.
Yeah, well, we're so honored to have you back on, and we're really excited to hear your analysis of all these recent events. Before we get too deep into it, the ASEAN summit ran end of October. So what were some of the key highlights that came out of this meeting?
I think the ASEAN summit this year is very momentous, I think, and very important precisely because of many things that happen in there. And some of the highlights of the whole summit is, first and foremost, now we're not anymore, because I'm from the Philippines, so we're a member of ASEAN. So now it's not anymore just 10 member states. It's already 11 member states of ASEAN, because East Timor, or Timor-Leste, was accepted and officially become part of ASEAN in that summit. So now it's an 11-member bloc, a regional bloc. And what is the significance of that? Why, in terms of acceptance and East Timor being part of ASEAN already? First and foremost, I think it signals that ASEAN and ASEAN member states wants to promote what you call inclusive, and it doesn't want to left behind smaller states like East Timor. And it's also good for East Timor, because right now there is a regional recognition that it is a sovereign state. And at long last, it will have opportunity when you talk about economics, when you talk about security, and when you talk about political legitimacy in the region and across the world. So it's a very important highlight, I think, of the ASEAN summit. The second one, I think, is the peace accord between Thailand and Cambodia. There was a peace accord that was signed. It's very important because, as we know, before the ASEAN summit, a few months back, there was like a military conflict between Cambodia and Thailand over territorial matters. But during the ASEAN summit, they signed the peace accord, actually in the presence of President Donald Trump, and they call it the Kuala Lumpur Peace Accord. So this is very important. The other highlight, I think, that is more on economic is the upgrade of what you call ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement 3.0. So it's a very important economic free trade agreement that is now 3.0. So there would be changes, and I think this is an exciting for not only for China, but even for the ASEAN member state and ASEAN as a bloc. And one last thing that is very important as well is, after the this is the first time, I think, that the RCEP member state, or what you call the leaders meeting of the RCEP as an agreement, economic agreement among ASEAN and its partners, the major partners in the region like China, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, also met in the ASEAN summit. So this is all very important, and it covers a lot, like political, security, geopolitics, and economics. So these are the highlights of the event in Kuala Lumpur, I think 3 weeks ago.
The updated free trade agreement Really, really important. And I want to ask you about it in just a few minutes. But first, before we do that, can you talk a little bit about the significance of the China-ASEAN relationship, especially in this kind of unpredictable geopolitical climate that Trump has brought with his like escalating trade war and protectionist measures? You know, how have China and ASEAN managed to navigate these kinds of uncertainties?
Oh, yes, it's a very important question, especially now that there's a lot of what you call global challenges and even geopolitical challenges is taking that is happening. And if you also look at the world and if you look at what you call globe a strategic competition between major powers, that's specifically between China and the United States. ASEAN is in the center of it because if you look at the region, the Asia Pacific region, it is like the center of the world right now when you talk about economic development. So it's very important to talk about ASEAN and China relations. So if you can see, China is the largest trading partner of ASEAN as a bloc and also of ASEAN member states as every ASEAN member states. I think even my country, the Philippines, we have a very challenging political and diplomatic relation with China, but at the end of the day, our largest trading partner, very important for us economically speaking, is China and also the rest of the member states in ASEAN. So given the trade wars, given the tariff trade wars being waged by the United States, so how important is ASEAN and China relation? Very important, precisely because when you talk about the region, you can see that, China and ASEAN, despite what you call protectionist policy coming from the United States, ASEAN and China, you can see that it promotes multilateralism. The spirit of multilateralism is very alive when you talk about ASEAN and China partnership, when you talk about cooperation, when you talk about openness and trade. And if you can see, China and ASEAN are very intertwined when you talk about trade, when you talk about markets. China is the biggest investor when you talk about infrastructure, digital infrastructure, physical infrastructure, digitalization like fintech, financial technology, even the green transition or the green economy, because China is leading in this area. So ASEAN are very much not necessarily dependent, but it's cooperating with China in this regard. So, and you can see that the in terms of regional integration, because there are two things, no? There is such a thing as ASEAN intra integration or regional integration. There's such a thing as regional integration, ASEAN with vis-a-vis its partner. And I think China plays a big role in that sense. And the more this regional integration deepen, to a certain extent, China and ASEAN are to some extent shield from the what you call the shocks of the tariff trade war, because they have an alternative, especially ASEAN member states. They have an alternative when it comes to trade, and that is China. So even though there are pressure coming from the United States, when you talk about imposition of tariff, even my country, 19%, zero tariff of U.S. goods coming to my country, we can diversify and we can look to China as a partner where we can export our products. So these are all happening at the moment. Of course, this is not easy for ASEAN member states and China because the pressure is also too much, especially coming from the United States. But I think the relationship is strong. I think the deepening of cooperation is getting deeper and deeper. But of course, there are challenges in the region, as you can see. And I think the challenges are more on geopolitics rather than economics. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned this a few minutes ago, but one of the more significant outcomes that came from this recent ASEAN summit is that China and ASEAN upgraded their existing trade agreement in key areas like digital economy, green development, and supply chain connectivity. And this is according to China's Ministry of Commerce. CAFTA 3.0 is what it's called. So this goes beyond traditional goods trade and moves deeper into regional integration, as you were just talking about. So what are the implications and opportunities you see of this updated agreement of CAFTA 3.0 for Southeast Asia and for the global South as a whole?
Yeah. Okay. CAFTA is the upgraded CAFTA. That's China ASEAN trade agreement. So what are the priority and what is the difference? What's new for CAFTA? First thing and foremost, the CAFTA 1.0 and even 2.0, because this is 3.0 already, is focused more on numbers, meaning reduction of tariff, quotas, and all that. But this one, CAFTA, is more, I think, focused on qualitative, and it has very specific areas where it will be focusing on. First and foremost, I think, is digitalization, green economy, and resilience in terms of supply chain. And one more thing that is also coming out, and it's now becoming a buzzword when you talk about ASEAN and China, is what you call the blue economy. So these are important aspects. And of course, when you talk about the global south, ASEAN member states and China are really part of the global south. So in that sense, in a way, CAFTA is like an example that other global south countries or region can actually imitate and follow. Now, when you talk about this, what would be the benefit? First and foremost, it will deepen what you call ASEAN China interdependence when you talk about trade and economics, definitely. And then it will have how do you call that? It will facilitate the transfer of goods and services and people also, because it's more connected now. It's deepening. It's more deepened in structurally speaking. And also, when you talk about digital trade, I think Southeast Asian countries and even other global South countries look to China when you talk about investment in terms of digital infrastructure like AI, artificial intelligence, all of these things. And even when you talk about green energy, especially now that you have the buzzword or what you call the focus on sustainable development, China is also is being looked at by ASEAN countries as a supplier of what you call solar energy, and in terms of technology, and even wind energy and all of these things. So these are areas that I think would be very prominent in the coming days. And I think one one aspect also that CAFTA will be benefiting is one sector, and that would be the micro, medium, and small enterprises, because now they can have access to the market of different countries in China and also in ASEAN, because there would be a harmonization of policy between China and ASEAN when you talk about trade. And one important aspect, I think, that is now coming into the picture, even when I attend conferences organized by China, attended by ASEAN member state, is what you call the blue economy. The blue economy basically talks about marine preservation or marine ecological preservation, fishery management, and fishery industry development, not only between China and ASEAN member states, and even it talks about joint activities in let's say in the South China Sea is one area between ASEAN and China that has something to do with exploration of let's say gas and oil possibilities, and even fishery management, marine scientific research. Now these are emerging. This is an emerging area that ASEAN states and China are very much focused on. And I think it would be, in a matter of time, be embedded in this so-called CAFTA 3.0 as part of the sector that is being prioritized, because it can be embedded in, like, for example, green transition or green economy, because it's all about marine resources. So these are very exciting moments, I think, for ASEAN and China and even the global South, because if CAFTA 3.0 will be successful, the other regional countries in Asia Pacific, of course, will benefit, because there would be what you call a spillover effect that they will also benefit from all of these things. Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously ASEAN countries and China have very strong ties. I do want to ask you this, and I know everyone has been asking you this, but Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will be the next rotating ASEAN chair starting in 2026. This was recently announced at the summit. At this year's summit, Marcos Jr., in his address, without naming China directly, criticized what he called, this is a quote, "the dangerous maneuvers and coercive use of tools and equipment to interfere with or obstruct legitimate and routine Philippine activities in our own maritime zones and airspace." This year's ASEAN chair, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, has said that disputes in the South China Sea should be resolved within ASEAN itself, And he warned that the involvement of what he called outside forces, which obviously meaning the US, would only increase tensions in the South China Sea. Despite this, President Marcos Jr. has continued to seek partnerships and strategic alliances outside of the ASEAN bloc to counter China. So what kinds of priorities do you think he will push for the region as a chair in the upcoming year? And how do you see this as affecting China-ASEAN relations?
Oh, that's a very challenging and very interesting question. And yes, you're right. I've been asked by many people, not only interviews, but even in conferences about this question that, what do you think Marcos would do in 2026? Because the Philippines is the chair of ASEAN, but of course it's under Marcos Jr. government. But from my perspective, it's like this, the way I see it, and also based on what I read in papers, and also based on statements of Marcos Jr. about how he gonna handle the ASEAN chairmanship and what will be his priority. One thing that I can tell you as early as now, I think the South China Sea definitely will be the centers. It will be the center stage of of Philippine chairmanship of ASEAN. I think so. But I think the specific issue that will be more discussed during the Philippine chairmanship of ASEAN will be the code of conduct in the South China Sea, because right now there's still a discussion on the code of conduct of in the South China Sea. So I think this will be the priority. I am, but definitely as far as I'm concerned, I don't see that the code of conduct will be concluded in 2026. I think it's a long way to go, because there's a lot of things to discuss. There's a lot of disagreement on certain things, but I think Marcos Jr. will push for this, and maybe he will focus more on how to issues that have something to do with rescue, disaster relief, and all of these things. I think that would be his priority when you talk about the South China Sea. And when you talk about economics, I think I wait before I talk about the economics, but I really hope, I really hope that when we assume the chairmanship as a country, that when he discuss or the Philippine side will, under his government, will be discussing the South China Sea issue, even though it's focused on the code of conduct, he will have that perspective and strategy of insulating the discussion on maritime dispute during our chairmanship outside of the so-called strategic rivalry and competition of superpowers. And we know we know already what I'm referring to, China and the United States. If it's insulated and it's not within that binary, I think the chairmanship of the Philippines, even if it puts the South China Sea maritime dispute at the center stage, will be productive. However, if it's within that kind of binary and framework, that is a very dangerous, or I would say that would be very challenging for Marcos Jr., because definitely other member states of ASEAN will not be happy about it. I think, and if there will be possibility that when you talk about this issue, there will be strong words against China, I don't think other member states will be happy. So that's my perspective, and that's my reading. And I think what other countries in ASEAN is expecting is for the Philippine chairmanship to push and assert what you call ASEAN centrality, ASEAN strategic autonomy, and ASEAN unity. Now, if you really look at ASEAN countries at the moment, it has really good relation with China. So to use the chairmanship to put to regionalize the maritime dispute of the Philippines and China in the South China Sea, I think that will be challenging for Manila, because I don't think the rest of ASEAN will agree to that. That's my reading, because I'm very much familiar with ASEAN member states' position when you talk about geopolitics and political issues and diplomatic issues in the region. Now, when you talk about economics, I think Marcos Jr. is very excited with CAFTA 3.0. He even announced it, and he even posted about it in his own social media, in his own official Facebook account. So I think he will be focusing on CAFTA, but I think it will be more on how, I think it will be more on facilitation of foreign direct investment, not just to the Philippines, but even to other ASEAN member states. And I think it would be focused also more on trying to facilitate opportunity for micro, small, and medium enterprises, because the backbone of our economy as a country is actually this micro, small, and medium enterprises, if you really analyze the Philippine economy. So I think he will focus on that. And I think he will be putting emphasis also more on disaster management, or anything that has something to do with the disaster relief, rehabilitation, and all of this, because the Philippines is facing a lot of disaster and natural calamities. But I think he will also stress on that matter. That's my reading. And for me, I just hope that he will be able to handle it. And because he is the president of the country at the moment, he will be handle it, and also he will be able to to detach from the too much of security and geopolitical focus. And probably he should emphasize more regional integration, inter-regional integration among ASEAN member states and its partners. And I really hope that the chairmanship will not be used to to have more not to use to weaponize against China in that sense, because that will not be good for the Philippines. And I don't think the chairmanship will be successful if he is more into that. I really hope that he will be able to calibrate his foreign policy, and I really hope that this chairmanship will be an opportunity for the Philippines to be projected in the region as a balancer, as a game shaper, and also it will be an opportunity for us to reclaim what you call diplomacy and project soft power. Because at the moment, many countries in ASEAN, and even beyond ASEAN, really has a perception that the Philippines is an extension of the United States when you talk about its strategic interest in the Indo-Pacific region. And I really hope that he will be able to balance deterrence and dialogue when we assume chairmanship in 2026, because many people right now are everyone is anxious about what Manila would do next year as the ASEAN chair. Everyone is so anxious. I'm not kidding. Even inside the country as well. I mean, in and out of the country. I'm referring to the Philippines, yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see, how will try to manage tensions in the South China Sea over the next coming year as ASEAN chair. And I just want to urge viewers, if you want a little bit more context on the South China Sea and context behind the clashes between China and Philippines, Anna did a really good episode with us earlier this year in which we take a deep dive into that. So I would urge all viewers to check that out. But also, just after meeting with ASEAN foreign ministers, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, released this statement on X, if we could bring it up. It was a tweet where he said that U.S. China relations has never been better, and that Trump's meeting with Xi and Hegseth's meeting. I'll just go ahead and read the whole tweet. I just spoke to President Trump, and we agree the relationship between the United States and China has never been better. Following President Trump's historic meeting with Chairman Xi in South Korea, I had an equally positive meeting with my counterpart, China's Minister of National Defense, Admiral Dong Jun, in Malaysia. And we spoke again last night. The Admiral and I agree that peace, stability, and good relations are the best path for our two great and strong countries. As President Trump said, his historic G2 meeting set the tone for everlasting peace and success for the U.S. and China. The Department of War will do the same, peace through strength, mutual respect, and positive relations. Admiral Dong and I also agreed that we should set up military-to-military channels to de-conflict and de-escalate any problems that arise. We have more meetings on that coming soon. God bless both China and the USA. So this statement is really interesting to me because just a day before the statement, Hegseth addressed ASEAN foreign ministers and he accused China of engaging in destabilizing actions in the South China Sea, and he urged all ASEAN countries to counter Beijing. And it was the language of it was very, very hawkish, right? And this statement, which came pretty soon after, it seems like almost a total 180. So Anna, I guess I'm just interested in what you make of this statement. Why the sudden about face? And do you really see this as the U.S. retreating from full confrontation with China?
I think when you talk about full confrontation of China, there is a pause at the moment, because I think this is my own analysis. I'm observing. I'm very much familiar of American politics, and now I'm familiar with the Chinese politics, and to a certain extent, I'm in geopolitics, international relations. So in a way, I can understand what's going on and I think if you only look at President Trump. I think President Trump, as much as possible, he doesn't want to have any kind of military conflict with any country for that matter. I think his interest is really like, I don't agree with his tariff trade war, to be very frank, because we are suffering from it. But what I'm saying is, when you talk about military conflict, waging war, just like the previous administration, that, what happened in Ukraine, I don't think that's Trump's priority. I think what he really wants is, his buzzword of make America great again, but in many ways through economic, by making it sure that the United States will have more economic opportunity. That's why, in some ways, I understand why he's trying to wage this tariff trade war. Though I don't agree with it, to be very frank, but I understand the distorted logic in that sense, okay? But so if you look at Trump, I don't think, as the president of the United States right now, I think that confrontation, whatever that means in a matter of time, will have a pause, because Trump is more focused on economics and this tariff trade war. And for me, tariff trade war is way better than military war or war for that matter. That is, So, but I don't agree again, just to qualify. On the other hand, you have elements in the political establishment, in the U.S. political establishment, that even until now, they really identified already, and they are really strong in their belief that the China is the competitor. And they cannot accept the fact that China is actually surpassing the United States in many respects. And they want to prevent that. That's why you have what you call the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States. And you have so many, if you look at the Philippines right now, it's being militarized by the United States precisely because of what this kind of discussion and the, of many discussion among defense think tank and analysts that, in a matter of time, there would be a confrontation, a military confrontation between China and the United States, precisely because that is actually, being pushed by the United States. But in this administration of Trump, I think there will be a pause. So if you really look at Hegseth, the initial statement of Hegseth, without yet I think that happened before the meeting of President Xi and Trump. But after the meeting of President Xi and Trump, I think Trump talked to Hegseth that, this is our direction, this is our policy, this is what we're gonna do. Of course, it's his boss. He cannot go against his boss. But I think Hegseth, as far as Hegseth is concerned, I think he has a different idea. If only he can implement his own idea and his own perspective, and what kind of foreign policy the United States would have, I think he would follow more his first statement, being so aggressive, being hawkish against China. But it just so happened that his boss is having a different direction. So I think that's why he kind of, 180-degree change his statement, and it becomes more like a dove, God bless China, God bless the United States. So in that sense, I can see it that way. But if you ask me if this is that, the possibility that, like the competition will disappear and the potential confrontation militarily of between the two superpowers will not. I mean, I don't want it to happen, but I mean the provocation coming from the United States will stop. I don't think it will totally be gone. I think it's a matter of, and I think it depends on the next election, because the United States will have its election in 2 years' time, I think. So it depends on who will be elected after Trump. And if that person is more, ideologue and a neocon, I think, this Indo-Pacific strategy will be pushed and pushed forward. But at this time, I see that there is, under Trump, I think that it will have a pause for the moment. That kind of situation. I mean, this push of, the push for the Indo-Pacific strategy, containment strategy against China will be recalibrated to a greater extent at this time. However, I don't believe that it will disappear. I don't think so. It will have a pause, a break, but it depends on what will happen in the next coming days. And it depends also how both countries, China and the United States, will follow through with whatever they're discussing economically and politically and militarily speaking. Because I think the officials of both countries from different levels are talking at the moment. There are constant communication. So if things will be okay and there are agreements, I think everything will be fine. However, there's always a problem. Well, you know what? The problem with the United States is every time there is a change in president, in the same manner, that's our problem as a country, the Philippines as well. If there's a change in leadership, in the change of presidency, the foreign policy totally changes as well. And the direction changes as well. So that is really the trademark of the United States. So it's the same with us. Unlike China, it's very consistent. Even if there will be a change in terms of president, whoever that may be, in terms of policy, they're consistent. It will not change. The planning. China China thinks in long term, and their plan is consistent. They will not deviate from the plan. Now they just finished the fourth plenum, and they have a 5-year plan. They will not deviate from that. Politically, security-wise, geopolitically, economic, they will follow the plan. They will adjust, improve based on the situation, but they will not deviate from the plan. But the problem with the United States and countries like mine is if there's a change in leadership, there's a change of plan, there's a change of foreign policy, everything changes, especially foreign policy. So that is something that is out there, and we will see. After Trump.
I agree with you that I don't think it's I agree with you that it's a pause. I don't think it's a full retreat. Yeah.
No.
I think he met with Xi and realized, that they can't at this point do a full military confrontation with China right now. They just cannot. So they're sort of shifting their resources to the Caribbean, to Venezuela, and also the internal domestic situation. Because
I think the internal domestic situation is very difficult for Trump. And also, I think the military establishment in the United States, or after the parade, where China showcased military strength for the first time. Chinese are not like into this. They're showcasing, flaunting their capability. Chinese are not like that. But for the first time, they flaunted their military capability, air assets, all of the military, not everything though, but I think the latest military assets and capability of China was flaunted. I think after that, there was a recalibration on the part of the United States, because to be very frank, when you talk about military capability, not necessarily, I think, in terms of conventional weapons, but probably when you talk about the high tech, this digital, computerized, and AI, China is way ahead of the United States.
Yeah, way ahead, 100%. Yeah.
100%. And not the conventional like bombs and all of this. I think the United States still have an upper hand. But when you talk about AI generated weapons, I think China is way ahead. And I think the United States realized that after the parade. So there was because there was a new report from RAND Corporation that I've read.
I saw that. I didn't read it, but I saw parts of it where,
I've reviewed the report. I reviewed the report, and the advice is for Taiwan, for the United States and Taiwan, for the United States and China to coexist, and also to cooperate on certain issues like climate change and all of that, and for the United States not to interfere even on the Taiwan issue, and also to for both countries to disclose their red lines. It was a mind-boggling report of brand. Like, oh wow, what 100? This is not. This is quite new for As I've read the report and I wrote about it. So I said, so it means the military establishment in the United States, they know that they cannot win. So that's what for me it's a break, probably because they also want to strengthen. I think the United States acknowledge the fact that they need to strengthen their military capability because they're left behind. So for me, it's not a total. It will this military confrontation that is being predicted by many and being pushed by the United States. It's not as if it will disappear. It's a pause, and I think the United States is also would do something to improve its capacity. So it's also buying time. It will buy time too. Yeah, that's my analysis. So for now, let's be happy. There's a pause. I don't know why he is very obsessed with given the peace prize. He's very obsessed with that. He needs to have a peace prize award. Well, he is into that. So I don't think he would want to have any kind of military conflict with a country like China. And I think the Ukraine crisis is not. He was not the president when the Ukraine crisis happened. So there is something in Trump that is so obsessed about this peace prize. But I don't agree with his trade policy, tariff trade war policy. I don't think it's beneficial to the United States. I don't know why he's into this, but in the long run, it will not benefit the United States because other countries right now are already diversifying their partners when you talk about economics and trade, and they're looking at China really as their big brother now. Because the alternative is China. If you're going to go to the United States for trade and economics whatsoever, you go to China. And China has also other partners like the BRICS countries and even SCO. And, so that is happening at the moment. So I also don't understand why President Trump is pushing for this tariff trade war. It will not be good for the United States in the long run, not just for other countries, but for the United States.
No, you're right. Trump is a very bombastic character. He's obsessed with trying to receive the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Even the way that he framed his meeting with Xi and the truce afterward, he framed it as a win for the U.S. And if there's one question, if I could just ask you one last question before we go, you study economics. You've obviously been following this trade war. What did you make of the Trump-Xi meeting? As I said, Trump characterized it as a win for the U.S. Do you see it that way? Or do you see it as Trump, China standing its ground and Trump just forcing Trump to back down? How do you see it?
Actually, because you need to understand that Trump is a businessman. He is really good in selling ideas and selling something. So he's selling to the domestic audience of the United States that it's a win for the United States. Look, President Xi agreed to certain things. Now we have access to the rare earth of China and da. But actually, it's not like that. I know that China already I'm in Beijing and I talk to so many people here. I know already, even before the meeting, many weeks before, that China will not back off and China will not bend to the whims and caprices of the United States when you talk about this tariff trade war, trade, and all of these issues. I don't think so. They're ready. They've been ready, and they've been preparing for this kind of what you call decoupling and all of these things with the United States. So I know that President Xi President Xi and the whole leadership of the Chinese leadership is prepared for whatever it is that the United States may throw at them, and they will not bend. They will fight it out. so I know that very well. And then so when you see the meeting and how Trump tries to project it, I think for the domestic audience of the United States, for it's good for the domestic audience, saying like, President Xi concede, and President Xi is very, cooperative, and would give us what we want, and compromise with us and all of these things. I think it's a calculated move on the part of China, and it's
Mm.
not necessarily that China bend, or China is bending to the United States. No, it's not. China is buying its time, I think, because you can see they did not agree really 100% to everything what the United States is asking from them. It's more like buying time. you
Mm.
know
Mm.
they know these are Chinese. They're smart. They know how to, you know but China is buying time, I think. But of course, in this kind of situation, there are concession, like, okay, I'll give you, this amount. Yeah, I can concede with this, but not this one.
That's true.
They know
But even, I mean,
it.
I would say that, this brought us back to the status quo before Trump launched his trade war, before Liberation Day. So I think we're back to the status quo. So the question is just like, what were the last few months for? Like, why did Trump, what did Trump do in these like last few months since April when we're back to the status quo? It just seems like a waste of time.
Yes, because like, for example, Trump already threatened China that it will impose 150% tariff and all of this, and higher and higher and higher.
Mm-hmm.
And then China said, okay, bring it on. We're fine. We will not. Okay, bring it on, and we will also retaliate. So when there was already, I think I think China knows the, what do you call, the weakness of the United States, and that is rare earth, and China
Absolutely.
knows that, because it's a very important commodity when you talk about not only in economics but even military, and even AI and all of this, other very important industries right now, especially the military industry. So if China just did not even say that, we will not allow export to the United States. It just, something like, we will try to limit, or will try to have accreditation of those companies who will have access to our rare earth, and then suddenly the United States knows that, it will be crippled to a greater extent. So that's why Trump had to really find time and opportunity to discuss with President Xi. But if you really look at the discussion and the agreement between the two countries, it's not as if like China already said, okay, no. It's just like, okay, I'll give you 30%. If it's 100%, okay, I'll just give you 10. Okay, let's talk again. I'll give you another 10. Let's talk again. Because China is buying time. China's buying time. I think China is prepared. It already prepared for the longest time, and it anticipated all of these things, because this is not the first time that Trump waged tariff trade war, or trade war with China. This is the second time. Trump 1.0 first administration, it's the same. Now it's more intensified, but it's still the same strategy.
Well, Anna, really appreciate your analysis, and we were so glad to have you back. I think maybe for those who are interested in seeking out more of your work, could you let us know where people can find you?
Yeah, I have a website, and the name of the website is Hegseth. Hegseth. Yeah, and also I have the same Substack. I also post my articles in Substack in the same name, Hegseth. And I'm in Twitter. My name is Anna Malindog-Uy. It's in Twitter and also in Facebook, so they can follow. Usually I post my commentaries on different issues, both domestic politics in the country, or domestic issues, and regional and international, geopolitical issues, and especially China-U.S relations. Is my interest, because I'm here in China too. But I mean, yeah. So please, if you are interested to read my articles, yeah, you can have access to it in my social media accounts. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna. Well, Chinese astronauts can now barbecue in space. As we reported last week, China's Shenzhou 21 spaceship successfully launched and docked with the Tiangong space station. China's Shenzhou 20 mission, already aboard Tiangong, celebrated the arrival of the astronauts with an in-orbit barbecue using a newly created hot air oven. Liu Weibo, Deputy Chief Designer of China Astronaut Research and Training Center, called it a major breakthrough and a world first, explaining, this is a quote, "We've built a purification device into the hot air heating unit, which is equivalent to installing a range hood inside the oven itself. When cooking, it can absorb the particles and carbon compounds produced, so it won't pollute the space station's atmospheric environment." The 6-man crew of Shenzhou 20 barbecued chicken wings and steak using the hot air oven, celebrating the end of their 6-month-long stay in the space station. The Shenzhou 21 mission will take over their responsibilities. We hope you enjoy this episode of the China Report. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.